Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Change Your Mind podcast, where we explore personal development, spirituality, and science. I'm your host, Kris Ashley. I am really excited for my guest today. He's joining from all the way in Sydney to talk to us about biohacking your genes. And if you're a fan of the show, you know that I love talking about this. I've had all kinds of doctors, functional medicine doctors on, nutritionists, so it'll be a fun conversation. First, couple quick announcements. Head over to the links in the show notes. You're going to find ways to connect with my guest. You'll find ways to connect with me. You'll find ways to buy my own book, Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality. It was endorsed by 3 people from the film The Secret, Marcy Shimoff, Michael Beckwith, Bob Doyle. It was endorsed by John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and a few others. What else? You'll also find links to all my other projects. I have 2 television shows besides the podcast. And as always, this podcast is part of the Los Angeles Tribune Podcast Network. We are doing phenomenal things in personal development. We have massive events every month. I was just on stage with Joseph McClendon and Dean Graziosi and Sharon Lechter and just incredible speakers, incredible podcasts in the network. Come be a part of what we're doing. What if the one thing keeping you stuck is the way you think? Welcome to Change Your Mind with Kris Ashley, the podcast where science meets spirituality and mindset becomes your most powerful tool for transformation. I'm Kris Ashley, author of Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality, trainer, speaker, and lifelong seeker. For years, I battled trauma, depression, anger, chronic illness, low self-worth, and the weight of old stories. Until I discovered how to rewire my mind, reconnect with my divine nature, and consciously create a new reality from the inside out. This show is here to help you do the same. Each week, we explore the intersection of personal development, spirituality, and science, diving into topics like healing, emotional mastery, entrepreneurship, resilience, and the quantum nature of reality. You'll hear powerful stories, gain practical tools, and real conversations that will help you change your perspective, get unshakable confidence, and live the vision your soul has always known is possible. Whether you're navigating a major life shift, building your dream business, or seeking deep healing and alignment, you're in the right place. So if you're ready to break through, take back your power, and create a life on your terms, this is your moment. Let's break free from the patterns that hold us back, awaken to who we truly are, and rise. Your transformation starts now. All right, so with me today, I have Dr. Sharad Paul. And Dr. Sharad is a doctor and a professor and the author of several notable nonfiction books for popular audiences in the field of skin, medicine, and genomics, such as Skin, a Biography, and The Genetics of Health. He also writes poetry and literary fiction, super cool. Time magazine called him Open Heart Surgeon, and the New Zealand Medical Association noted that he has been described as one of the most inspiring, intelligent, and compassionate men that you are likely to meet. In 2015, at APAC, Asia Pacific's largest health conference, he received the Ko Awati, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, I apologize if I'm not, International Excellence Award for leading health improvement on a global scale and for fostering patient-centered medicine. Amazing. Welcome, Dr. Sharad. I'm so happy you're here.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Kris. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and thank you for joining at 5 a.m. your time. You're such a trooper and obviously dedicated to your mission.
Definitely.
So I always start my episodes off the same way, and that's by asking my guests, what is their origin story? So I want to focus kind of on the biohacking side of what you do. You have a great book that I didn't list called Biohack Your Genes. And what is it that put you on the path to want to write that book? Because there's a lot of doctors out there that aren't writing books like that.
I think it's largely because, I've been in medicine. Next year, my practice will be 30 years, right, for a long time. And I think one of the things realized is medicine as an industry is about illness and procedures, right? It's rather episodic. But true health is only something you need to take personal responsibility for, right? So in my previous book, The Genetics of Health, which you mentioned, there's a line where I say, just like law doesn't always translate to justice, medicine isn't always health unless you take personal responsibility. Right. So I'm a bit different in my practice with my patients in the sense that I always generally try and make them take responsibility, talk to them a lot about things outside the treatment plan that they can do with their lifestyles and diets and things like that. And literally, the inspiration for this book really came from a patient of mine who said to me, "Look, forget all this. Just tell us what you do. You don't look like you've been in medicine for 30 years. You, famously never lost a working day because of illness. So, all these years, except when we had a little lockdown period for COVID, and literally, so people were like, tell us what you do, right? And I literally try and practice what I preach. So what I was thinking about, the bigger picture is the main things which have actually shaped longevity. Everybody in biohacking again is following the same medical model of being interventional and medicinal in a way, if you see what I mean. But I think the bigger gains are in prevention, things like your diet and lifestyle. Because if you actually look at the last, say, 200 years, the biggest gains in longevity have been because of public health things like sanitation, clean water, childhood vaccines, things like that, right? Because most people, there was high mortality from children getting diseases or people drinking bad water or not having sanitation, being exposed to bacteria, things like that. Yes, of course, things like antibiotics and things like that have made a difference, but the biggest gains in longevity have not come from our actual treatment plans. They've come from what we've done with our lifestyles. And I think so this book is largely about that kind of biohacking is, for example, what is the kind of diet which can reduce the risk of dementia? What can you do to improve, your, physical performance? Are there actually any supplements you can take which can literally help you live fitter and longer? So these are sort of things I cover in the book. And so you can take it from as small to as big. Like if you're at the first level, if you just read the book and get lifestyle and diet advice, that's great. If you want to go all the way to personalizing it for yourself, my lab, which is sort of a university-based one, we also do a gene testing program for wellness, in which case we can determine what kind of diet and lifestyle is best for you, including what type of exercises, what type of supplements, all the kind of stuff.
Wow, that's really cool. So, okay, so your genes determine what kind of diet and exercise will be the best fit for you. That's super interesting. I haven't heard anyone say that before.
Yeah, so look, genes are our blueprint, but they're not our destiny in a way, right? So genes are generally things which make proteins in our bodies, and we use proteins for various things. So, but the problem with humans are we aren't really very intuitive. Like we don't know what's good for us. You know what? When you try feeding an animal junk food, and often it won't eat it, but we will eat it because we think, hey, this tastes good.
That's good, yeah.
So part of the problem is we don't really know what's good for us sometimes, and so sometimes we need a bit of help. So, for example, in the gene tests, you can find out things like, are you somebody who should be drinking coffee? Like, is caffeine good for you or not? Because there's some people it's really good for, and some people it's not. And, then of course, there are the most obvious things like, lactose and gluten, all that kind of stuff. But there are also other things, like some people particularly may need more folic acid, or some people may particularly need more vitamins. So we can also be targeted about supplements you take, because if you willy-nilly just buy whatever you see in the store and take it, you're just wasting your money, because a lot of that gets excreted by the body anyway.
Yeah.
The way of looking at this is more like we're using science. So the book is very evidence-based. There's a lot of research links there where you can actually see where the studies were done and things like that. And then it's all about changing your environment personally, which means what you're putting into your bodies as well as your movement and things like that. And then largely, of course, the technology that comes with it. So essentially, that's the summary.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. Um, I know there's like genetic mutations that like the MTHFR one, like some people can handle certain things because of that. Is that something also you test for?
Yeah, very much so. So that's really about methylation, right? So basically, what it is folic acid is involved. So the MTHFR is the gene, and if you actually have a faulty gene, then you produce too much homocysteine, right? So this homocysteine gets converted normally into methionine. But what happens is if you produce too much homocysteine, then you have a higher risk of heart disease and strokes and things like that. The other interesting thing, and this is particularly for females, is we know that folic acid supplementation, and I've mentioned the details in the book, literally is anti-aging in the sense that we know that, as we get older, ends of our DNA get shortened, the telomeres,
Right.
and so we can measure people's ages using that. But in actual fact, in people who take folic acid in females, studies have shown that it actually reduces that shortening. In other words, it actually lengthens them, and so there's
Wow.
definitely an anti-aging effect. So if I had to tell, if anyone wanted a simple, cheap, and easy thing, just not even huge doses of 400 micrograms of folic acid a day, many studies have shown in females to actually be an anti-aging thing. It's interesting. It's the same effect has not been shown in men. It's partly because men need to consume more folic acid to reach the same level. But having said that, the evidence is definitely there.
That's really interesting. So is it folic acid or folate? Because I've heard
Same.
folic
In
acid.
medicine,
Okay.
if anything, if in medicine, it's funny, in chemistry, if it's folic acid, it's often called folate. Like uric
Okay.
acid, it's called urate.
Okay.
So you may say, people say uric acid, for example, what causes your gout, is also called urate. Anything with an IC acid, they just make it ATE. So folic acid,
Okay.
folate. Yeah, same. It's the same.
Okay. I'm just like I'm pregnant right now, and I've read so much about like
They
folic
generally
acid is
will give you now, when you're pregnant, you'll be taking a few things they'll give you anyway. And partly, yeah. And the big reason for this is the active form of this 5 methyl tetrahydrofolate. That is the MTHF, and that's the gene you were referring to, the gene which
yeah.
is involved in it. It converts this homocysteine to methionine, and methionine produces many methylation reactions. You often heard the word methylation.
Hmm.
And what it means is this is the reason they're linked. So, for example, methionine is an antioxidant. It helps the body get rid of toxins after, radiation, drug overdoses, environmental things like that. So if somebody has low folate levels and this conversion is not happening, you accumulate your homocysteine. So like I said earlier, this causes in um, people, it can actually increase your risk of heart disease and things like that, but also overall for health, the huge impact. So the first thing with folic acid supplementation was in reducing birth defects, right? Because in pregnancy, people always look at it because we know that it's linked to neural tube defects, like spina bifida and things like that, which you would have been informed about.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so that's super cool. Like going back to the fact that it lengthens your telomeres. So what is the male equivalent of that? Is there like some supplement that helps men anti-age?
At the moment, I think there are lots of other things. I think if you simply said for everybody one superfood, that would be blueberries, right? But on the other hand, I actually think men also will benefit from it. I just think the evidence isn't there because their diets are probably poorer. So I think because you just need a lot more folic acid to metabolize it. So I just think the studies haven't been done. So
Right.
personally, if you ask me, I actually take folic acid supplement now after I wrote the book. When I was researching for it, literally, but I think everyone should probably take it, and it's not harm, provided you don't have any other medical condition where it's contraindicated, which I can't think of any, because you're just taking a 400 microgram, you're not taking a big high dose.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Super interesting. Okay, so my husband and I have been having this debate lately. We're very into biohacking. We eat very healthy. We don't eat sugar or processed food, or I don't know, we don't really drink. Everything's grass-fed or wild caught, and vegetables and healthy fats. And we exercise every day. And my husband does weight training and cardio, and we walk every day. And he just went to the doctor, and his LDL was high. And so his doctor was like, you have to stop eating red meat. You have to stop eating like butter and other saturated fat. And I'm like, wait, I've heard so many things on the internet, and who knows if these are credible sources. That's why I'm asking you about how like cholesterol is actually a good thing and it's not really about the LDL. So I'd love for you to kind of like clear this up for us.
Okay. So firstly, cholesterol is, of course, in the body for a reason. It's useful because it helps produce, nerve membranes and various things like that, right? Of course, there are many forms of cholesterol, and it is to do with how your fat is transported to and from the liver, right, where it's metabolized. So you have the HDL, which is considered your good cholesterol, which is high density because it's sort of carried with a big lump of protein and a big blob of fat, so it's got higher weight. And then you have the LDL, which is the lower density because it doesn't have a big blob of protein in it, right, encased in the fat. And then you have your triglycerides. I guess the key thing is the ratio of all these things, right, in your body. But for some people, and this is where the genetics come in, is some people fundamentally have an inherent problem where they may actually have more LDL in the bodies because of their gene type. And for those people, it's actually important to reduce saturated fat. This may not be for everybody, but for some people, it may not be genetic, and it could simply be that they've just consumed too much saturated fat. And in those people, you can make a bigger difference with what you do in your lifestyle and diet. But having said that, increasingly, if you're eating, when you said be cod, and this is excellent because cod is the highest source of vitamin D, right? And so fish is very good, like cod and salmon and all that kind of stuff. Of course, the problem with bigger fish outside, like tuna and things like that, increasingly they can be contaminated and things, so you want to get good sources. But otherwise, fish is very good. But there's actually not a lot of evidence that eating a lot of dairy as an adult or consuming red meat is actually good for health, right?
Okay.
So especially in people who have a tendency to produce more, saturated fat. Because, for example, the same thing goes for butter. Like if you ask me what's the best fat, so fundamentally, you can have monounsaturated fat. So the fat can be either unsaturated or saturated, right? So saturated fats are like your butters and things like that, and your animal meats and things. And your unsaturated fats are like olive oil, which is monounsaturated, or polyunsaturated, is like your sunflower oil and safflower oil and all those kind of stuff, right? So in actual fact, olive oil is probably the best fat you can have. It's more monounsaturated. So many studies show, other than the polyphenols and various things, it also has anti-inflammatory benefits. Like you can't probably understate the benefits of olive oil. So I would say, if anything, change for somebody like your husband who has a high saturated fat or high LDL, the biggest things you can do from a lifestyle point of view is move to something like olive oil for everything, where you would use butter, right? And I think, look, red meat's interesting. In the book, like I was saying in the first chapter, there's a thing called the MIND diet. And this is a diet which is shown to reduce Alzheimer's by up to 50%. And where I'm going with this, why I'm linking it to stories, because the MIND diet came from another diet called the DASH diet. So MIND stands for Mediterranean intervention for neurodegenerative delays comes very big, but it essentially shows you eat these foods, you reduce your risk of Alzheimer's more than any other medication can do at the moment. And then if you go to the DASH diet, was a diet to stop hypertension. So people were basically reducing the blood pressure by following these diets. And what they found in it is a few things. I can take you. The first one is I've just done an ABCDE kind of a mnemonic in the book, so I'll take you through it briefly. So A is really, I would say, avoid these foods, and literally it's red meats. And I would say if you're having red meat, like I say in the book, look, I tend to be a realist in the sense you don't want to make life not enjoyable. So for me, I feel that's why I'm not of the view of biohackers where everyone's using a lot of medications now, with all this Ozempics and the GLP-1s. I think there's a need for it, but I don't believe, like I was at a biohacking summit and some doctors feel everyone should be on it and that kind of stuff. I think that's rubbish because you lose your sense of taste. You lose, in life is about living, enjoying, meeting people, having a bit of fun, right? So if you really love your steak, then I think what you need to do is you can have a 1 day a week kind of a thing. Like you have to, or 1 day a fortnight, you really need to limit. So in avoiding the foods I mentioned, particularly red meats, because there's no evidence anywhere that it's particularly good for us on a daily basis or on a regular basis. Any junk food or fast food is particularly bad because they have trans fats, which are even the worst form of saturated fat.
Yeah.
And B is actually what is really good for you is berries, and in which you cannot say, like I said, blueberries, you cannot understate the importance both for mental health and for health. And that's including children and adults. They've done studies before exams, performance improves, memory improves, all sorts of things. So B is all your berries, particularly blueberries. And there's actually a difference between blueberries and strawberries and other things because blueberries actually have, because they have skin, they actually are less exposed to, like strawberries pick up contaminants more easily because they don't have that. So blueberries particularly good for you. The other thing with the B would be beans are actually good for you as well. So, if you are eating beans and those things. And then the C is if you're eating meats, then I think chicken, as long as it's not, deep fried kind of stuff, chicken, especially chicken stock and chicken soups and things like that. Like we say, chicken soup for the soul, that's particularly good. And the D is your dairy. As an adult, there is no evidence that any other species drinks the milk of any other animal, right?
Yeah.
So personally, I feel that it's actually unnatural, and actually in health point of view, if you ask me as a skin doctor, right, every condition I see from acne to rosacea, various things, one of the things we know triggers them or can make it worse is dairy. So there's really nothing good about dairy. And E is for everything green, like I said earlier, any green things, because they have more folate. So your leaves, your spinach, collard, Brussels sprout, broccoli, kale, all those kind of stuff. And F is, of course, fish. Like I said, fish is particularly good. The best fish for you is your oily fish, which is what you're talking about, your salmon and cod and things, because particularly they have high vitamin D levels. Most fish have omega-3, but not all have high vitamin D levels. And then G comes is the little controversial one, which I don't know, you and your husband may have discussed. We're discussing your diet is a glass of wine good for you or not, right? This is quite controversial in medical circles because there's been recent evidence that almost all diseases and cancers go up if people drink too much, like, it's breast cancer, various things. But there is evidence from a, mental health brain point of view that extreme moderation, like if you had just a glass of wine twice a week or something like that, there's actually some benefit. But the key thing is the type is important. The red wines are better than the whites because they actually have, the dark grapes benefits. And the other thing is also white wines are a bit more acetaldehyde. So if you ask me, a glass every now and then is not a bad idea. And H, I've just put a cheap way of using H is your whole grains, which is your oats and your quinoas and those kind of raw oats is excellent. So for your breakfast and things. So, and I is include foods, particularly most important thing is like olive oil and plenty of nuts and seeds. And among the nuts, the best ones for you are things like walnuts, because they're high in walnuts and flax seeds and all the kind of nuts and seeds. All nuts are pretty good, but some nuts are higher in saturated fat, like, if you're having cashews, got more fat. But if you have almonds, are quite good for you, but there's a low calorie, but probably the most healthiest ones for you are walnuts. And so I guess that's a summary of a super healthy diet.
Thank you for going through all that. I have a question about the beans and the grains, because I've read that they have high amounts of lectins, which can act as cancel out nutrition, so you can't absorb it, and can cause inflammation and can cause all sorts of issues. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I think in general they're good for you. There are certain people, like for example, when we test people's nutrition, certain people's metabolism would be different. And so we'll say you have, for example, some people similar to us saying you have a faulty folic acid gene, or you have a faulty this kind of gene, so you got to consume more choline, or you consume more this and that kind of stuff. But I think broadly speaking, just from, you're not going to get ill just from eating beans. You may actually have a problem in it. Also is linked to how your gut health and your microbiome and things are, right? Because increasingly that's a big topic, because as a skin doctor, increasingly we see a link between the skin and the gut, and the skin and the brain. So these are things only we're coming around to now in medicine. But I think, look, as a blanket rule, if you ask me something like red meat on a regular basis is overall bad for everybody. But things like that, if you're avoiding certain foods, like, if you have a thyroid problem or this or that, avoiding certain vegetables because they can increase your thyroid levels, or certain foods can increase your uric acid levels, things like that. So I think that's where we tailor it based on the individual.
What foods increase thyroid levels? I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, so a lot of these, some of these kind of vegetables you'll be eating can actually increase your thyroid levels, especially like nightshade ones. So a lot of people find the nightshade kind of vegetables. So yeah, and it is essentially, if you are right on the borderline kind of stuff, you want to avoid certain things. So those kind of things are quite important. Yeah.
Interesting. And so you were talking about that kind of diet, like the Mediterranean style diet, decreases Alzheimer's by 50%. I've heard a lot of buzz online lately that Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes. Is there truth to that? Is it caused by insulin resistance?
Sugar is actually no good for us. So sugar is a big part in any of these diets. Or the low sugar is really beneficial, right? I guess it's more the other way, in the sense that high sugar is inflammatory everywhere, right?
Right.
So therefore, it is no good for our general. It can worsen our metabolism. So obviously, it causes more inflammation. It causes more diseases, more, including Alzheimer's and things like that, right? But it's not a per se. I can say from a personal thing, I was really interested in the Alzheimer's research because my father has Alzheimer's, right? So that's one of my inspiration for researching that chapter was really Dad. And one of the things I noticed was that, especially as he developed it, it's almost more like a vicious cycle. He would crave more sugar, right, in the early stages. And you find that when people get Alzheimer's, early stages or dementia, people tend to gain weight because in the early stage, because they have this craving and they just start eating more and more sweet stuff, right? And
it's really interesting.
They didn't used to before. And I think there is no doubt that there's plenty of evidence. So you're partly right in the sense that, absolutely right. I think sugar plays a big part in dementia, Alzheimer's. But I think the issue is it's not a single issue. Look, there are many other things also cause it. Obviously, there's a genetic tendency to get it. So everything in life is nature and nurture, right? So there's a bit of what you inherit, your genes, and then your lifestyle. And the lifestyle modification can cause your genes to produce different kind of proteins. So you can actually modify your genes, and that's what we call biohacking, right?
It's epigenetics too, right?
That's it, absolutely, epigenetics. That's it. And so really, biohacking is just because we're in a world of tech now, and everybody likes words like hacking and everything else, right? That's how
Yeah.
it came about, right? So I tend to be more at the evidence-based. How can we do most things through a lifestyle kind of biohacking with few supplements? You know, the people who take it to the extreme, you would have seen like shows there with people trying to I've seen longevity clinics where everybody giving people, you know, rapamycin and those kind of things. I'm
Right.
not one of those doctors, partly because there's a lot of side effects again and lots of other things. So personally, definitely, yeah, I think cutting down sugar would be a big anti-aging thing as well, because of the fact that as a skin doctor, if you ask me, I mentioned dairy is no good earlier. Another one would be sugar, right? Because too much sugar, again, triggers acne, inflammation on your skin, and therefore it potentiates inflammation anywhere else. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. I think maybe in simplifying it, they call it like type 2 diabetes. So it's not a bad way to explain it to layperson saying, look, high sugar can cause that, but there's more than just a sugar
There's more
issue. There's
to
other
it.
things happening. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. Okay, so we've talked about diet. I'm sure like exercise is one of your recommendations. So are there certain types of exercise for longevity that you recommend?
Yes. So I think exercise actually, therefore, for the different types of exercise do different things. So, for example, let's start with the brain function and then I'll go down to the longevity part. So, if you're looking at brain function, then leg movement exercise is the most beneficial, right?
Huh.
So if you stopped and think about it, the function of the brain, it does three things. So, firstly, it's movement, which is as walking, and then orienting, which is your balance, and the third movement is grasping, which is, you know, what children do, the babies do, right? That's the most primitive. So any exercise which does all the three is the most beneficial. So for example, if you are running or brisk walking, if you're holding on to something, is better. And walking for walking's sake or running for running's sake, as opposed to just doing in a specific path every time, so that there are new things for your brain to learn, is the best. So in my previous book, I mentioned a study, I think it's also in this book, about there was a comparison between yoga and Tai Chi and dancing the tango. And tango was actually best for brain function because tango is a walk and you're holding on to somebody and it's free form. It's not specifically already decided what position you're doing, and it's a bit more aerobic. Whereas yoga was good for stress relief and relaxation, and Tai Chi particularly is good for balance, right? So there are different kinds of exercises for different things, but overall, brisk walking or running, things like that. I mean, obviously, if you have issues with your joints and you have to do more work to be fit to run, then you could do brisk walking, is absolutely good. But the key things is holding on to something, changing the path you walk on. All these things are very important. As we get older, it is definitely important to lift more weight because we lose not only muscle tone, and one of the ways we keep our strength and keep our youth is also by beginning to lift a bit more weight. It could be just dumbbells, things like that. Doesn't mean you got to do big heavy weights, but the key thing is you got to lift more so that you're pushing yourself a little bit, right? So I remember there's this, I can't remember her name. I was in the US speaking at one of these uh, health and longevity kind of things, and there was a neuro scientist professor in America. She's quite well known. Her name just slips my mind, and she always goes, "Forget this namby pink weight." She was telling this group of women, "Get this heavier weight." She goes, "No more of anything which looks
No
pink."
more little 5-pound pink weights.
So the thing is, I think as we get older, especially, that's particularly important. It's probably when you're younger, you more naturally have that tone, but we lose it. So that's important. And the other things are really flexibility, right, as we get older as well. So I guess the key thing is that this is partly tailored to which stage in your life you are, right? So that's one thing. So the second thing is also, to answer your question, we can actually tailor this. So funnily enough, so the gene tests we do are purely for wellness, not illness. So we don't test for the diseases because your doctors and the hospitals do those things anyway. We're literally about diet and lifestyle. So, but in actually some people are more suited for more endurance exercises, and some people are more suited for power exercises. Everybody needs to do a bit of both, but we can actually pick for which people, which kind of exercises are better as well.
That's really cool. That's super, super cool. Well, thanks for running through all that. That's really interesting, and it kind of sounds like maybe doing like a mix of everything is a good way to do it too.
But each one does certain different things, and also see for some people, again from the gene testing things we can find out some people have a higher risk of tendon injuries, for example, just from a genetic quirk like Achilles tendon, things like that. So for these people, it's really important warming up and warming down for long periods before they're doing things like runs and things like that are very important. So otherwise you're the sort of person who suddenly runs without it and you're likely to snap an Achilles or something like that. So it's really, really important. All these things matter. But as a general rule, if you didn't want to do any tests and you just wanted a blanket rule, like what you were saying, yeah, absolutely, a little bit of everything is good. As you get older, a little bit more weights than you probably would have otherwise done is good. Increasing your endurance over time, like, pushing yourself to walk more or run more is good. Always changing the path you don't do the same thing every day, right, is actually better for overall thing because your brain's also working. It was like a funny thing. I write a blog, and if you just put my name, drsharadpaul.com, there comes up to a blog site as well. And there was a thing where I was pointing out that how when they studied London taxi drivers, they actually had a lower risk of dementia because in London they're not allowed to just use the Uber map. They just need to know the roads like inside out, like 22,000 roads. It's an interesting thing in London. There's a thing called the London knowledge, and it's very traditional in the way British are. So the taxi drivers have to memorize every little street, and you've got to pass this test before you're allowed to become one of those black London cab drivers. And so literally, if you're in London and you literally give them your postcode, it's so crazy how accurate they are. You don't even need to say, you can say, I'm going to like a W1X, and then the car goes there. Or you tell them the street and they'll know it. They don't use the maps at all, right?
Wow.
So therefore their brains, they're found in the area which is in the hippocampus and memory and areas which reduce your dementia is actually well developed. So I wrote a blog saying, driving a London taxi may be better for your brain than driving an Uber. But it's funny, but that literally explains this, because the more you use your brain, so when you're walking or running, getting out on the road, changing what you're doing, don't do the same thing that and try and, one tip I would give you is try and become like a London cab driver. If you're going down a road, try and think, what's the next road, try and memorize them, but don't do the same path every day, and then come back to it after some time, so then you can check if you're getting the streets right or not, or then it jogs your memory as well. So literally running helps the brain, and then you can also jog your memory. So particularly,
that's a fun game to play with yourself. That's super interesting, and it just makes me think about, like, I bet our reliance on technology is kind of like dumbing down our brains a little bit, right?
Very much so. I think that's a reality even in our students. Like, I'm a professor at a university, and one of the things we think now is people less and less learning how to think, right? Because we are outsourcing everything to computers and technology and devices. And I guess in some ways, the conversation we're having today is about investing in your own health and thereby achieving longevity. So my thing is more about optimizing performance. I really feel, look, things like cancers and things like that, anybody can suddenly get it, right? So somebody like me who's been super healthy all these years, hasn't lost weight, well, you may get something, and that's life. But while you are here. You need to be at your peak, be able to do everything you want to do, be at your fittest and strongest and healthiest and happiest. I think so. That's what my focus is health span rather than lifespan.
I love that.
And it's almost like what I say to people is it's almost like passive versus active investing for lay people, right? If you look at, say, investment in financial markets, right? Plenty of studies show that for an ordinary lay person, over any years, if you simply put money in a passive fund which simply tracks the top stocks, you actually do better than guys you pay to do it, right? Very few fund managers actually beat the stock market passively. Like what I mean is you can simply put money, just buy the top 10 stocks over 30 years and you'll do better than the guys who are charging you fees, right?
Right.
And this is the same sort of thing in your health. What I say is this is like passive investment in your health. If you do the invest in your diet and lifestyle and the various things, then you actually do better than what you would if you were going to the active treatments and going and starting yourself straight away on medications or this or that. Yeah, there is a place for it, but I don't think you first go to an illness model. And that's fundamentally the difference, because medicine is an illness model. If you need to go to a doctor when you're ill because they're going to treat you and the treatment is going to be a drug or a procedure or something, and that drives that industry. But biggest gains you can make in your own personal health will be things you have to do, which means it's not as easy. Same as if you need to, get off your butt and, start doing a bit of research or finding out what's good for you and sort of taking a bit. And where I think the modern technology, when we're talking earlier, where we can use it to a gain is things like AI, and helps the passive part of my research, because you can screen the documents, you can sort of get them down and put them in a pile, and then you can read them yourself. But like you're saying, it can dumb down, like I was telling you earlier, because your show is called Change Your Mind with Kris.
Yeah.
I literally got my email this morning. I was just put my alarm and I got up at 4:30 in the morning thinking, wow, I better not oversleep. And I've opened my email and it said, the host has changed her mind. And some Google Gemini or something, and it said, based on the calendar, this show is not going ahead. And I thought, what?
Like, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, that's so funny. I feel like I need to give everyone a warning now, like all the guests.
I reckon, because if I hadn't, then I thought, so when is it rescheduled? So I thought, let me read the email. So I went down it, and it was just your reminder saying your show is on. This is a last minute reminder that the show is on. This
The host has changed your mind. That's so funny. That's ridiculous. I'm impressed. Kudos to you for being up at 4:30 and having the wherewithal to scroll through the whole email and read it.
I'll send you a screenshot of it. It's hilarious. I couldn't believe it. Just anyway.
Yeah, I'm glad you told me. Okay, so we kind of talked about supplements. We talked about diet and exercise. Are there any other kind of big things that people can do lifestyle-wise?
I think the biggest thing you can do is also for your mental health, the power of positivity.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm just going to give you a little mnemonic for that as well, which will, a little thing to remember it by. But see, fundamentally, if you stop and think about it, it's natural for, as humans, as we evolve, to try and, be healthy because, obviously you're supporting your families, various things. It's normal for us to try and move because we needed to move to do things. But it isn't inherently natural from a biology point of view for you to be happy. You know what I mean? Because happiness is a learned thing. It's a
choice.
Yeah, it's a choice. Yeah, what I'm trying to get at is inherently, why would biology create an animal specifically to be happy, right? Because that doesn't matter, right? So if you think about it, but where I found this really interesting as a skin doctor is when we study skin biopsies, for example, we know that people who are positive, their wounds heal significantly faster, like something like 30% faster, something like than people who are negative, right? It's crazy. Like you think these were studies done on skin biopsies where somebody's taken a little sample of skin for something, and you wouldn't think in such a small thing it should make any difference, but it does.
It's
So,
really cool.
for every disease, be it cancers or be it illnesses, we know that being positive, your outcomes are better than if you are fundamentally pessimistic. So the power of optimism is actually huge. And I think so. I put a mnemonic in the book, which is VIGOR, and I'll take it to it. So the V is, how can you be happy, or how can you train yourself? And this is because, again, it's not natural. And the V is visualizing your success or what you'd like to be. Like, see, some of these things have been taught to sports people and things like that, because nowadays sports is such an investment that they need people who think, oh, we're spending money on these athletes, so we want them to succeed, so they give all this mental conditioning. And so the first thing is, visualizing success for you, visualizing what you want to do, visualizing what your life, your ideal life. And the second thing is being intentional. The I is, so it is being intentional about something. So for example, you can keep a journal or keep a diary or write down things. And studies have shown that if you write down, think, and read something, it's more likely to actually happen than if you simply thought it, right? And also being intentional about your relationship with people, in the sense that, so if you're saying to somebody, thanking them for something or whatever, think about why you are doing it. Like, don't just say simply a generic thank you. Make it more personal. Like if you're going to some restaurant, say, thank you for specifically making my thing without milk, or you know what I mean? Like, and I think those kind of things makes your mind actually be more empathetic, thinking of the other person. And
Love that.
the G is the power of gratitude. So what I think is, however bad you think your life is or good you think of it, there's something you can always be grateful for. Something small, you can always find something small every day, like, that you can say, oh, today, look, I feel, even if you're not feeling well, there's something you'd be positive for. Like, you might say, compared to some other people in the world, you read something in the news, be grateful for that, right? And the O is your optimism orbit. So it's really important to surround yourself more with people who make you feel better than people who drag you down. And this can be, even within friends or family or various things. So what I mean is, I'm not saying exclude those people from your lives if they're family, but what I'm saying is, this is how you train yourself to be happy. So this is an intentional thing you're doing. So always your optimism orbit. Make sure you are with people who make you feel good and positive and boost you up, not people who will constantly drag you down, right? And the U is the power of understanding. So for example, if you are anxious and you're somebody who gets stressed because of exams or something like that, understanding that everybody who's sitting in exam is probably going through the same thing. So thinking of the cause behind it, understanding the root cause of it. So for example, if you thought, oh no, today I got up and my knee is hurting, and rather than that getting you down, you try and understand the cause, and you say, actually, it's probably right, because yesterday I ran 10K, so I overdid it a bit. So yes, so that's the consequence. You see what I mean? Just that way of mind shift on it helps a lot. So I actually do that all the time personally. I take very little things for little niggles or something. I don't like taking medications, even though I'm a doctor. Literally, you have to be ill to do it, right? Because why would you do it for small things, like particularly like little painkillers or this or that? I always try and just understand the cause behind it. I'm like, yeah, okay, this caused it, so therefore I need to rest this a bit, or need to do more stretches.
Right, and just because you're in a little bit of pain doesn't mean you need a painkiller, right? Yeah.
And then because people are too easy to, one of the things I find as a doctor is, when people come, because they're in a consultation and they're paying for things, people always expect to go away with something which is a medication as opposed to lifestyle advice, right? And the last one would be is reinforcing these things, so that to stay happy, reinforce it. So for example, if you are feeling a little lowish, look at things which watch a rerun of something which made you laugh like crazy, roll on the floor. So, there's always that power of reinforcement. So do things which make you laugh silly and that kind of stuff. So I think, following the steps with intention is actually training your mind for happiness as well, because it isn't inherently natural. You can, for some people, easy to get into a negative spiral. But the key thing is you can literally follow these steps, like I said, and you find that you start becoming more positive. And as you become more positive, your health improves as well.
I love it. You're speaking my language. I wrote a book all about that myself. So I love, what is it? It's not the metaphor. What's the word? But whatever, vigor. I just like that. That's great. And I love that was your answer. Positive thinking. That's awesome.
Because, everyone else, you have to put it all together. It's about your mind and your body, right? Because like I said, if you just look at it from skin, and why did somebody like me, who fundamentally works with skin and skin cancer, end up researching heavily into genes and health and wellness, is largely because you can't have bad skin and good health, because skin reflects what's going on underneath, right? You can't have bad metabolism and good health, skin. You can't have too much sugar and have good skin. You can't have too much dairy, good skin. You see what I mean? So there is a link. Skin is just a universal organ. So that's another thing, is creatures like starfish, which have no hearts, and the creatures like sea squirts, which have no brains, but everyone's got skin, right? So there's genetic signals in skin from an evolutionary point of view, very preserved. So actually skin is a good barometer for what's going on inside and outside. As we know, the biggest aging thing from a skin point of view is getting too many sunburns and things like that, right? Because externally, and then there's pollution, there's various things. And internally, of course, it's things like too much sugar, too much, inflammatory proteins like dairy, things like that. Yeah.
So it's interesting. So I had eczema like my whole life, and I finally realized it was triggered by gluten. So for like 14 years I didn't eat gluten, and if I did, it was like a light switch, it would come back on. But I could eat it overseas. I could go to France, or I could go to Italy and eat pasta and bread. So I think it was probably more like whatever fake yeast or something we put in it in the States. But lately I've been able to eat it and not break out. So is that a sign that like maybe my gut is healing? And
it could mean one of two things. So one thing is you may have gradually trained your gut by just the same way, like how people with peanut allergies, one of the methods people were treating some pediatricians in more modern times, especially for the more moderate varieties, is gradually introducing a little bit, so your body almost like having a vaccine to it kind of stuff, right? So you may have done that naturally. But on the other hand, the other thing could also be, so when we test for gluten, there are two types of gluten. One is the complete intolerance, which is like your celiac end of the spectrum, right? And then there is a more insensitivity where your gut can't handle it. And then we can actually pick in our genes, we look at a series of genes, and so we pick them from mild, medium, moderate to high intolerance within it, right, or sensitivity. So it's quite interesting, like 2,000 years ago or so, there was a Greek doctor in Cappadocia, Arates, who was talking about gluten, and I'm mentioning for you particularly because you mentioned it. And I often say, like in modern times, we've lost the power of observation. So now we tend to rely on tests and scans and things like that. But he actually wrote that people eating wheat, there were two types of. One was the real disease end of the spectrum, which was more like almost an immune system reaction, which is your celiac, like your autoimmune kind of stuff. And then he says there's a more allergy kind of stuff. And so he actually, koilos in Greek was abdominal, and these people had abdominal symptoms, and that's why the word celiac came from that, right? But what was interesting is, so you may have one thing you could have is you may not have a complete, you will probably not celiac, but within that sort of sensitivity, you may have had just a medium kind of intolerance, and just from the fact that overall your diet has been improved all these years, your gut health changes a bit, that you've moved a little bit into the mild spectrum.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it totally makes sense. I'm going to ask you one more personal question, and I gave you, I've never actually shared anything on here. I'm going to try. Let's see. I apologize.
We're almost done an hour. We've done very well.
I know. Okay, I'm going to try and share my screen, so hopefully it doesn't show like my whole screen. But I'm going to see if I can just show you. Oh, here we go. Okay, so this is my son's leg. Can you see it? It has looked like this for 6 or 7 months. I sent this to the pediatrician, and he was like, it's dry skin, put coconut oil on. We did that for months. It did nothing. I tried tallow. It did nothing. Any idea as a skin doctor?
Yeah, I mean, it does look like general it's a type of dry skin where the hair follicles sort of get blocked. One of the things we actually find which helps, obviously, if you're using things like oils like that, you actually ideally do it before you get in water and things like that, right? Like before you bath and things like that. But one of the things we find particularly is urea-based creams, which you can just buy in your normal supermarkets and things. Sometimes you have like 10% urea-based creams because it unblocks the pores. So it actually, you find that for this kind of condition, it actually improves a lot more than other ones. So you'll be able to buy just ordinary like moisturizers containing 10% urea, and it might help. He doesn't get like patches of eczema or something anywhere else, just this feels.
No, it's on his legs. He started getting it on his arms too, but it doesn't like itch him. Like when I get eczema, it itches. Like he seems totally unbothered.
Because this is more common in people who have obviously family history of eczema and things. It is related to dryness of skin. But the key thing in any dryness of skin, the key things you can do is avoiding soap. So using, pH neutral cleansers, which shows the soap is alkaline, it's not good for skin. And the other thing is absolutely like moisturizing like several times a day. But I think particularly for that condition, what you find is something which has like 10% urea, and you just get it. You'll find moisturizers with urea. Probably you'll find it beneficial.
Okay, thank you so much. We're so weird about, speaking of biohacking, like we don't use any chemicals in our house. Everything's all natural. We don't use any chemicals in our products. So like, I haven't wanted to go get like that's why we're using coconut oil and tallow, but it's obviously not working. So
the only problem with the oils is sometimes they can actually block your pores, right? Just because they can be a bit comedogenic, right?
So maybe make it worse.
My advice normally is, when does your skin really dry out? When you get into water, paradoxically, because water washes off the natural oils, right? So it's really important you use oil before you get into the bath or shower or things like that. And I think afterwards it's really important to moisturize. But I think urea is fairly natural thing, so it's really you'll get just a plain 10%. Won't have any other chemicals you can actually get. I think it probably help.
Amazing, thank you so much. Yeah, like you said, an hour's flown by. You're incredible. I love talking to you. I learned so much. I'm sure listeners learned so much. And I'm sure listeners want to know where they can connect with you, how they can get the genetic testing done, all the things, get your book. So if you want to just take a moment and share.
Yeah, so the title of the book is just Biohacking Your Genes. So if you simply did biohackingyourgenes.com, it actually takes you to a site where you can not only order the book, but also you can actually do the gene test yourself if you're interested. If you want to follow me and my blog, and you will get these kind of tips and advice regularly, and you just put my name, it's just Dr. Sharad, SHARAD.PAUL.com, and just put my name down, and you will actually find, and there's a regular blog there, and it gives you all these kind of little tips and things like that, including like, it talks about various supplement diets. It's very evidence-based, but it's like little interesting tidbits like what we're talking about.
Amazing. Awesome. And I'll put all those links in the show notes too, so if you're listening and you're driving or something, you can always come back to it. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for waking up at 4:30 to have this conversation. I had no idea you were getting up so early, so I appreciate you. And thanks for the work you do in the world. It's really important.
Thank you so much for having me. I know I was traveling, so it's a bit of a early rise and not a good background and everything, but I love talking to you, and keep up your good work, and all the best.
Thank you so much. If you're listening, please send this to someone you think might resonate with it. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all the things. Let's help humanity every way we can. All right. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.